Hi, welcome to this other edition of Philosophy and Metaphysics of Divination. Today I'd like to go a little bit more on psychology. This time, developmental psychology, which I will bring a link to a previous video, a previous course, which was about what I called the 5 philosophical principles of becoming. So let's get right at it. You may have noticed another post that I put in the classroom F. It was basically a chart which had the 2 left columns, developmental psychology models, and then the 5 other columns would be the 5 principles of becoming. So the first one, of course, I put the Lawrence Kohlberg model of moral development. That is something that I put 2 Wikipedia links to go with it. As for the other model of psychology, it is the Ozer and Munder model of religious judgment. An excellent book, really worth your while. Unfortunately, I did not find any sources in English, on the internet, which clearly explained the content of this book. Unfortunately, you'll have to research on your own or try to get it on your own. There's no Wikipedia article. The one that it is, the Wikipedia article that there is actually in German. So yeah, unless you speak German or unless you want to go through the whole process of Google Translate, you might as well try to get the book. It's really good, really well translated. So I'm going to get right to it. So first of all, know that I'm not going to give any, I hope I won't sound like a psychology professor or anything like that. Those are my own understandings of the models of development. It's a little bit how I used them back in the day when I was into counseling. So when I was a counselor myself. So I used that a lot with people who did indeed have spiritual dilemmas and moral dilemmas, and I was able to use that model to help push people a little bit towards the next stage of development. Now, one thing about development that I do need to talk about, human beings are developed 2 ways. There's 2 ways of seeing it. The first one is that the human being has stages of development which are discrete. So there's a discontinuity between one stage and the other. It means that I don't understand the world or I don't understand the subject the same way that I did before I had reached that state. So the best example is when you look at Piaget, when he does experiments. For example, he asks very little kids, they have sticks, and they say they have, say, 8 sticks of a different length, and Piaget asks kids to order the sticks from smallest to largest. Now, when they are too young and they have a lower cognitive capacity, they'll group them 2 by 2, like 1 small stick and 1 big stick, 1 small stick and 1 big stick, 1 small stick and 1 big stick. And then when Piaget came back, when the children had reached a higher stage of development, he said, "Do you remember that game we did with the sticks?" And they said, "Yes." "Well, what was it?" "You had to order the sticks from smallest to lowest." And Piaget was like, "Okay, we'll do it." And then they would put the 8 sticks instead of 2 by 2, it would be 1 row of 8 sticks where they would have a perfect incremental order. So basically, this whole discontinuity, you project yourself with the stage that you are at, just as you will remember the previous stages with the stage that you are at, which is to say very, very differently. So a lot of people says, "Yeah, well, when I was a kid, I thought exactly the same as I do now." Well, no. You think you do, you understand you do, because you can't understand outside of your understanding, so to speak. you'll always have that cognitive bias of that subjective perspective. Now, the other principle of development, psychological development, is that not only do we evolve in discontinuity, but we also evolve in continuity. Which means, for example, when I was a kid, I was able to understand addition, subtraction. And, when you get to be an older kid and a teenager, well, you do multiplications, you do divisions, you start doing some algebra, and so on and so forth. There is an incremental, smooth development that happens in continuity to it all. And it's not just these hard, discontinuous changes of development. So yes, there are things which will be smooth, and yes, there are things which will be completely different. A word on what is known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. To try to keep it relevant to developmental psychology, the Dunning-Kruger effect is that you kind of overestimate your intelligence when you don't understand something more intelligent than what you understand. So you think you understand it, but you don't. This might be a bit vague. So to put it really simply, if you see somebody who's dumber than you, they're dumb because you understand everything and you can organize it in your mind as well as you can, and you organize it better than them. If you see someone who's smarter than you, they're dumb because you don't understand their organization and you reorganize it in your mind according to your own way of seeing things. And in your own way of seeing things, it's better organized than the smarter persons that you don't understand. So dumber people, you see them as dumber than you, and smarter people, you see them also as dumber than you. The exception to that, of course, is people that are a little bit smarter than you, so that you can understand where they're coming from, and that usually pushes you to a next developmental stage. So essentially, too smart, you think they're dumb, and you're the dumb one. Too dumb, or you think they're dumb, and you're the smarter one. And if the person's just a little bit dumber than you, well, then you will consider them as very smart, of course, because you can organize everything that they see, and their level of organization is similar to yours, which you hold yourself in high esteem. So that is to say, wherever you are in your life, you could be a 5-year-old, 15, 39 as myself, you are always at the peak of your development. So that means everything behind you, you can, you organize it, you have it, you've got it. Everything above you, you can only see a little bit above you, and not so much further. But that's okay, because it doesn't mean you can't conceive it. And that's one of the things that I would say magic, or the esoteric tradition does better than psychology, is that you have this initiatic path with different stages that you are meant not to understand until you get there, and you have all these processes, whether they be alchemical operations, whether they be Masonic or pseudo-Masonic initiations, whether they be different stages in prayer and mysticism, and different demons of the Goetia, and so on and so forth. So those are things that are actually well processed. I think better processed in esotericism than in psychology in general. Okay, so these little parentheses done. Let's take a look at our chart. I printed it out myself just so that I know where I'm going. You can follow with the other post down. Okay, so let's just start a little bit on Kohlberg's moral development. Now, of course, Kohlberg, he wanted to go from from child to adult and so on and so forth. A lot of people would try to have this, well, between this and that age, you're at this stage, this and that age, you're at that stage. Doesn't work that way. it's really, really, really unique from person to person, and therefore, you will never have anybody quite fit a stage perfectly. You'll only have examples of behaviors or examples of dilemma resolutions. A person is dynamic in their cognition. We don't think the same way all the time. We don't believe the same things all the time. We change from day to day, from hour to hour. So these stages, you can't identify yourself at one stage or another. It's really different situations, different ideas. However, you might be able to identify different moments in your life where that behavior was at that stage or not. So, step 1. Kohlberg moral development, obedience, and punishment. Well, this is a very simple one. What is good is what I am rewarded for. What is bad is what I am not rewarded for. What I am punished for. The absolute easiest example is a toddler. They understand right and wrong when it comes to mommy and daddy's going to punish me, or mommy and daddy's going to be happy and they're going to give me a hug, or whatever. You have people who will have various levels of intellectual deficiency. I don't know if that's the right word in English. In French, it's déficience intellectuelle, so I say intellectual deficiency. I think the old word that is not used anymore was called mental retardation. I think that's not politically correct, but unfortunately I forget the the exact word in English. But intellectual deficiency, developmentally challenged, perhaps. Oh well. So yes, the incapacity to understand that whole morality beyond punishment and reward. Dogs can be pretty much a good example of that when they're young, when you're learning to train them, because we understand that, of course, animals do have empathy, and animals can have much higher cognitive development than some people sometimes, I would say. Okay, self-interest, that would be stage 2 in Kohlberg's moral development. So that's the whole, what's in it for me? What do I get? What is it that, how am I going to profit from this? This moral variation could be basically, well, there's some examples I like to think. Corporate culture, that what's good is what gives you profit, and what's bad is loss of profit. Breaking laws or not, corporations calculate, okay, if I break this law, I'm going to get a so many $100,000 fine, but I'm going to make so many $1 million in profit. So let's break this environmental law and poison the tap water because we're going to make more money, because what's good is profit and what's bad is loss of profit. Another good example would be in context of abuse. A pedophile would be saying things. No, I did not hurt this victim because it felt good. Well, that person doesn't really. Well, it's another type of cognitive problem at that point, the impossibility to have empathy. But they are related, of course. The pedophile or the abuser will see it something good because it brings them personal pleasure rather than personal pain. So it's one step above reward and punishment. It's because there's a stronger subject in it. There's a stronger subjective presence of the person, and it's and the whole idea is that there's a certain capacity for manipulation, to a certain way to twist things, especially when it comes to morality. It was pleasure, kind of like another example I like to give. The narcissist slaps his wife, and the wife says, "Oh my gosh, that hurt," and the narcissist replies, "It didn't hurt me one bit." Or, that can't hurt because it doesn't hurt me. In that kind of situation, that moral interpretation, that interpretation of moral judgment would be, there is no pain, therefore it is good or it is okay to do it. Step 3, Interpersonal accord and conformity. Of course, the first two stages are usually recognized as as more childish. When you come to interpersonal accord and conformity, you have the people that say, "I'm a good person." That's the really the best way of seeing it. I'm a good person. I do things right because, and then you ask them why. What makes you a good person? Well, I'm not rude. I'm not this. I'm not that. I do what is needed, etc., etc. Other people who say, well, he's going to go to heaven because he was a good citizen and he did this and he did that and he was following all of those social norms and very much liked by the community. I'm a good person because people like me, and so on and so forth. That would be stage 3. It's a very, very I would say it's a very egocentric one, but also egocentric in a sense that you want to be appreciated by others. So there's a little bit of otherness in there, and it's still very egocentric. Number 4, authority and social order. Well, at this point, the person is able to perceive themselves as members of a greater society. So yes, you need to listen to the priest, and you need to listen to the police. The police are good people. The whole American ad campaign about the thin blue line, about they are police officers and therefore they are good guys because they are sanctioned by society. The ad campaigns about these soldiers are out in Afghanistan defeating Osama bin Laden. They're fighting for our freedom. They're doing the right thing. But in reality, they're doing something else. Being mercenaries for the oil companies, as some critics would have said. So the whole idea of it's good because it's socially sanctioned, because we're part of society and we have to do the things that are right, that are written in the rules. It's not about just me, how I feel that I'm a good person because I follow the principles that my parents taught me. It's because I'm part of this society. I'm part of something greater than me. I vote. I do the right thing in society. Social contract orientation. At this point, it's not just a question of listening to authority. People will also do it because they feel it is right. So in that situation, the moral person will have a tendency to be a little bit more, I would say, it will be a little more introjected. These whole values about society and this and that. It's not going to be because there's this greater thing that I'm part of and that I have to participate. It's going to be, I feel that my culture is right. I feel that my religion tells me the right thing to do. And I do it out of choice because I do understand that there's a certain goodness to it. I understand where it's meant to go, and what's going to happen if I don't do this or if I don't do that. So this is the part where there's usually much more philosophical discourse on the individual as to what is good, what is bad. Lots more of a lot more thought behind it, a lot more nuances, a lot more complexities, a lot more variables inside it. In this case, you're able to say something from your vantage point, and you're able to understand relativism at this point also. And so what's good for me isn't necessarily what's good for you. It's something that happens within society, that's decided, that's negotiated, that becomes something that is built by members of society, and that's subject to change. So yes, of course, it was a good thing. It was the right thing to do to not let women vote back in the early 1800s. But today we've evolved beyond that, of course. Universal ethical principles. What's really interesting in there is that morality becomes completely introjected. It's something that a person will feel very deeply and will never be able to go beyond that. A good example that I could use is this whole Stanley Milgram experiment. Stanley Milgram, what he did was he took people, he brought them into this lab, and he told that person, well, okay, we're going to test how a person can do well at math if you shock them. So you're going to ask them mathematical questions, and then if they get the answer right, you put a check mark on your list. If they get the answer wrong, you shock them. And there are increasingly progressive shocks, so they're labeled, say they're labeled things like 2 volts, 4 volts, 8 volts, 16 volts, and at some point they say, okay, deadly voltage, do not go past this. But the switches are still there. And so what happens is that they start asking questions, and of course they get them wrong. So at first it's bam, nothing, bam, and the person says, ouch, well that hurts, okay, next question now. And then there's a guy in a lab coat watching the guy doing the experiment, being very authoritative. And so the experimenter continues shocking the person like way until they're dead or whatever. But what they don't know is that the person getting shocked is an actor. At some point they say, oh, that hurts, and they're screaming. They're like, no, please stop, I don't want to die, stop this. And the guy in the lab coat says, you have to finish the experiment. And they see if they're going to obey the authority until the end. Now there's a version of this where Kohlberg actually went and did this experiment, but this time with interviews at the end, asking them, well, why did you do what you do? And so, of course, the person who's just obedience and punishment, he's like, well, okay, I did this because there was $100 at the end, and I had to do this to get the $100, and it was okay because I got the $100, and thank you very much. Self-interest would have a very similar answer. Oh yeah, I don't really care about the person that died because it's really too bad for them, but it wasn't my interest, and they had signed, and it was okay for them. And then, of course, you go interpersonal accord and conformity. Well, it was okay because there was a researcher that was there, and he was telling me that it was okay and everything was going well. Same type of answer when you get to authority and social order. Yes, it's the science that did it. It's probably safe and it's probably okay because the person who was screaming, I'm sure they're going to be okay because, the authority is taking care of it, so on and so forth. Social contract people usually tend to stop. They say, okay, I'm going to have to stop there because my values say that you can't hurt someone more than that. So my values kind of just simply stop at, I hurt him this much, I don't think it's right, I've been asking questions, so I'm going to get up and quit the experiment midway. And then when you get to the universal ethical principles, people just got up and said, hey, this experiment isn't ethical. What do you think you're doing? You're a crazy person. I don't care if this or that. No way, I'm reporting this to the police or whatever. So this whole universal ethical principles, this person generally has not introjected, but has this kind of carries their ethics with their personality, and it's kind of very, very much embedded into themselves, and they're just they're living it out at the moment. They know what is right and is wrong in a way that is very personal and very real to them. There's nothing on the outside that really comes to influence their moral judgment. And if you ask them anything, they'll be able to argue yes, no, why not, etc., etc. So they have a complete, well, not a complete, that's a little bit discriminatory, but they have a very high cognitive development, a very high moral intelligence, so to speak. Doesn't mean that they're better than anyone. It's just It's just an example, and all of us will have examples of all of these stages in our lives. So it's really important not to not to discriminate or not to have an elitist or a value judgment on this moral judgment stuff. This is not vodka, by the way. It's only water. If it would have been vodka, I would have had ice. Okay. Osar Edmunder, religious judgment. Now this we get to something a little more interesting, because it's not just morality, it's really the relationship that we have with with what they call the ultimate. So it's a little bit monotheist as a study, and nothing wrong with that, but it's the relationship that one has with God, or I could say the level of alterity, or the able to understand otherness. So the whole idea is that at some point at the very, very beginning, everything is black and white. And as the person progresses down in the stages, or up in the stages, so to speak, the very black and white divine relationship changes a lot. Well, is nuanced, is complex. So it's the relationship that we have to God, or the ultimate, or the relationship that we have to the contingencies of life. So step one, Deus ex machina, or Deus ex machina. Actually, the X is a spelling mistake. It's actually supposed to be an S. Anyways, basically what it's saying is that God controls everything, and humans are basically at God's mercy. So if God wants something to happen, it's gonna happen. We don't have any say about it. Another example is the classical, the Bible says it, I believe it, that does it. No nuance, no nothing. If the Bible says, that you can go ahead and genocide a whole people, then you're going to do it because the Bible says it, and that's it, that's all. So there's no negotiation. God is essentially a tyrant, or it's an all-powerful daddy that you have to listen to 100%. And you can see how that is really related to the moral judgment phase of reward and punishment. God punishes you if you are bad, and He rewards you if you are good. If you are in a third world country starving to death, well, God is punishing you because you are bad. That's it. That's all. If those countries would accept Jesus or whatever, or if they were convert to this other religion, then things wouldn't be happening so bad in their lives. The very Calvinist, you are either an elect or you are not. So step two, do ut des, do unto me and I will do unto you. Or it's basically how we will have this exchange between each other. Basically, this is where we can start to negotiate things. A lot of people will give that whole idea of hey God, if I'm really, really nice to my mother, will you help me get a better grade in my math test, or whatever, if you look at it from a child perspective. Other people will say, well, if you want God to do anything for you, then you have to make sacrifices, or you have to give a prayer in exchange, or you have to give a libation in exchange. You have to exchange. You have to give something to God if you want God to give something back to you. You have to be nice and obey God if you want God to obey something to you. So you're like, hey God, I'm going to donate $5,000 to charity. Will you please make my son who has cancer get better over the weekend, or something like that? So it's the whole idea that you can negotiate with God, you can exchange with God, you can bargain with God, basically. Ego, autonomy, responsibility. That's stage 3. This part is it's sometimes understood as the atheist part, the Richard Dawkins stage. The what in the world are these superstitious people doing there? These are, thinking that if you light some incense, God will like you better and make things happen. No, not at all. That is all bunk, superstitious bull crap, and you should never, ever, ever believe in that stuff, because in reality, there is no God, and we are actual, we are totally free. If you have that from a deist perspective, you're going to be saying things like, oh yeah, God exists, but he doesn't really intervene in human affairs. He lets humans do the things that they must do. So the evil in the world, that's not God, that's humans. And the good in the world, that's not God either, that's humans. God gave us free will so that we create the world as we want. We can petition God as much as we want, but God, he still won't intervene so that he doesn't break free will. That is another one when it comes to stage 3. Stage 4, mediated autonomy. This is where you come to the whole thing that, well, okay, yes, we are completely responsible, but we are in a greater world, and I think that this world is headed somewhere, and for example, where I am and all the autonomy that I have is still not all powerful. We are nonetheless but puny human beings within the great scheme of the divine plan. And the divine plan, of course, will bring us at the end towards where we're supposed to be. So it's kind of like a renewed faith, but this time it's not a faith of God will do it in our place, but it's that we will do it with guidance from God or with inspiration from God and so on and so forth, and going towards where we're supposed to be, which is usually goodness and freedom. Stage 5, unconditional religiosity. What we have there is this whole idea that the relationship with the divine, where, I'm trying to find the best words for this, where there is an actual intersubjective relationship with God, where there is kind of like a sharing of a common ground, a familiarity with God, an understanding that, yes, of course, God can do all of these things, but unfortunately, we have our responsibility when it comes to the divine, so to speak. It's hard for me to understand this stage, actually. It's a very one-on-one relationship. Then we go stage 6. That would be called universal solidarity and communication. Oh gosh, okay. My computer's battery has 7% left. So I'm going to just throw this at you, end the video, plug it up, and then I'll do another video right away for when it comes to the next step, which I think will be much more exciting. Universal solidarity and communication. God and man are one. Self and God are one. Has been described as the ultimate illumination or the ultimate sanctification when it comes to religion. And the idea, anyways, I finished that. I'll turn this off, take a break. I'll come back and stay tuned for part 2.